I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into a novel that's funny, poignant, and powerful, as well as relatable. The name of the book, This Time Could Be Different. It's written by Khristin Wierman, and it follows Madeline, a high-powered executive who seems to have it all, except happiness. As she embarks on a journey of self-discovery through yoga, meditation, and facing uncomfortable truths, she challenges everything she thought she knew about success, purpose, and fulfillment. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Khristin, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Logan.
Great to have you on the show. Are you a little bit Madeline, or is Madeline a little bit you? Tell us a little bit about the
I def
inspiration there.
I definitely drew from personal experience, and I think, I love writing fiction, but I think everything's got to sort of come from some experiences that feel true. So, yes, I think there's a lot of me in Madeline, and a lot of who I was working to choose to be.
Exactly. You started out your career working for top companies in the nation, and you kind of found it unfulfilling, right?
I did, and this is my second novel that was published, but it was the first one that I wrote.
Mhm.
And it came from, working so hard for something and finally being in this place where on the surface it looks like you have everything that you wished for and dreamed of, and really having to face that it's not only not making you happy, it may be costing you a lot more than you think. And that was just difficult on a lot of different fronts.
Oh, sure. Jim Carrey's got a great line. He says, I wish everybody could be rich and famous so they could realize that's not the answer.
That's a great one.
It is a
Great
great
one.
one. Yeah, because I think particularly in show business, a lot of people want the approval, they want the attention, and they think they'll feel better about themselves, they'll be happy, they'll have all the money they need. And, they might feel just as empty, unfortunately, inside because happiness is from inside, not from without, don't you think?
Such a true statement. And I think that sort of theme is really what I have found of great interest in all my books is, so often there are these surface lives that look so perfect, but there can be a lot of things happening underneath that are really difficult. And, how we unwind from that and how we really succeed in becoming the people we choose to be is what I'm really interested in.
Absolutely. Now, the book blends humor with deep personal transformation. Tell us a little bit about how you balance that and what it was like writing that part.
Well, I think that's what life is like a lot. And I think if we didn't have those moments of humor, I don't think we could get through sort of the tragic, really difficult, you know, facing tragic and difficult truths that happen to us in our path or in our past. And I think so. I think that's how life goes. At least it has for me. And I certainly the humorous moments in the book lightened up some of the deeper, darker things that I really went into. So and for me, reading has always been an escape, a form of entertainment. And, there's just nothing better when a book makes you laugh out loud. I mean, to me, that is one of the greatest gifts. And so if I could sprinkle some of that in along with some of the deeper, more difficult stuff, that's what I aim to do.
Yeah, it keeps you going along. You get a laugh here and there, you get a touching moment, you get some insight, and I think that's what a good writer wants to achieve when connecting with a reader. What do you think drives overachievers like Madeline and make them push themselves to the brink?
That is such a profound question because I've spent a lot of time thinking about, because I definitely had those aspects of myself, how did I get this way? And I think there's many, many things, but I think, so often things that happen to us when we're really young, we're getting all these messages and signals that may not even be intended. But, for so many of us, if you weren't working hard, if you weren't, if you weren't moving forward and pushing forward, your worth, you didn't feel a lot of worth. You didn't necessarily get a lot of love or encouragement unless you were kind of performing. And I think that can happen really subtly. And again, I don't think it's always intentional, and it's probably rarely intentional. But, if as a child, those are all the messages that you receive, that sort of forms how you believe you have to be in the world. And I think those things become habit, they become ingrained, we're not even conscious of them. And yet, it's really not a sustainable or healthy way to continue to be.
Exactly. Yoga and meditation are key elements in the book. Tell us how these practices influenced your own life.
Well, very much so, because the book came about after a lot of yoga and meditation. I left the corporate world, had the dream job that I'd worked for, got to build my own organization. It was everything I'd wished for, and it was just depleting me. And I was unhappy. There's no other word for it. And so I quit and had, for the first time in my life, the opportunity to really do whatever I wanted to do. My husband was very supportive. We were fine financially. And, I'd never been in that place before. There were family members who needed me. There was a lot going on. It was always just, I had to work. I had to make some money for myself, for other people. And so I'd never really been in that state of just,
Mhm.
world is your oyster, baby. What would you like to do? Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to, and I just found myself up against a blank wall, which was so unsettling. Why couldn't I figure this out? And so it was really, things like yoga and meditation and even writing for me began just as I was reading so many self-help books, just as a way to do something creative, get your mind moving in a different way. And it turned out that all of that sort of formed the novel writing, which I think is really, the place I found that makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's the corporate structure that is so soul eviscerating when it comes to achieving? Do you think entrepreneurs have the same kind of burnout, or do you think it's the whole, bosses and overlords at the corporation that make it kind of not that enjoyable?
That's such an insightful question too. I think the burnout can happen in any place, but I think what can happen in a big company, and I would like to say that to begin with, that job at that big company really was my lifeline to get out of some very untenable, home life experiences with my
Mm,
parents, family. And so, I think there's a place for everything. And so, just coming into structure, coming into, managers who, really focused on their employees succeeding. I mean, that was my lifeline for many years. But so often, I think what begins as a lifeline can sort of become a noose around our neck later on.
mm,
And it just means it's not a fit now. It's not good or bad. It's just not a fit now. But back to your question, I think what can happen in the corporate world is, a lot of stuff can hide in there. And, there's so much pressure to succeed and there's so much bureaucracy. And you can really get a lot of people that, you know, trying to think about how to say this. There are wonderful people, there are people that are not, and you can
yeah.
find yourself in some really toxic environments. And I think, as happened in the book, you find yourself having to make some choices that you really feel like, wow, is this really the person that I would like to be? And the
Yeah.
answer is probably no.
Yeah, work's a kind of a pyramid. There's only so much room at the top. It does become cutthroat after a while. One of the few bits of advice my dad gave me when I went to work for a big corporation for CBS in the 80s, he said, the people at work are not your friends. And he said that after working for 40 years. And it's true. If you're lucky, maybe one of those people will become a real friend, but most people want what you're going after. And that's kind of part of the toxic nature of the workplace. And like you said, there's a lot of great things about it too. There's wonderful Christmas parties and bonuses and, accolades, but it can be soul draining as well. You have found refuge in writing. Tell us a little bit about your writing career.
Well, it surprised me as much as it surprised anyone else, because I just was never if someone had told me a year before I started writing that that's what I would do, I would have laughed and said, "There's absolutely no way." But what happened was, as I said, I was sort of, I was sort of desperate. Just, I was so upset that I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I had the chance to do what I wanted, and just trying to find what would nourish me. And I had the idea while I was playing golf with my husband and stepson, and it felt so outrageous. The idea felt so outrageous, and yet it was so interesting. And I remember I came home, and the next day I sat down and wrote one scene, and it was a woman talking with her therapist, which, became the base for this time. And it was a feeling I hadn't had before. It was just this feeling of sort of like being home and finding something that just suddenly feels like such a good fit. And that was how it began. It was certainly very fraught. I mean, writing the first novel, I just wasn't sure I could do it. And then getting published is a whole other whole other thing. But I
Yeah.
was lucky I found some good editors. And then with the second novel, I thought, gosh, I don't think I can do this again. Can I do this again? And, I was able to. And it was at that point that I found my publisher and, a place that I was really a good fit. And I'm writing my third one now. And, now suddenly I sort of know I can do that. So that's sort of been the journey. Was certainly not a straight line and was certainly 2 steps forward and sometimes 1 step back or sometimes 3 steps back.
Yeah.
But that's how it's been.
Yeah, I think that's true with almost every endeavor in life. If it was an upward, spiral, it'd be easy, but it's up and down and back and forth, and it's just all part of it. Have you envisioned this as a movie? It's been a long time since Working Girl, and her happy ending was she was embraced by the corporate structure. And now here we are 40, 50 years later after Melanie Griffith was in that role, where the working girls are saying, maybe it's not that great. Maybe the guys can keep it.
That's such a wonderful question. I do envision all my stories as either movies or limited series, and I actually wrote a screenplay for my first novel, Buck's Pantry, and have been playing around with that. So I do, I do, to answer
Yeah,
your question.
that'd be
It's kind
great.
of the dream.
I think Madeline would be a terrific character, and I think it is a very 2025 story. And I think it was almost taken for granted that men question what's it all about once they hit 40 or 50 or however many years into their career. But I think women are having those same questions now. Are the sacrifices I'm making worth it? Is the money worth it? Is the so-called prestige worth it? And is my identity too tied up with this corporate world? No doubt. What do you mean by the title, This Time Could Be Different?
So titles are not what I consider my strong point. And so we played around with a lot of different ones, but I'm trying to remember. It was in a later iteration. I think my first book had already come out, Buck's Pantry, and so I was getting ready to get this one out, and my publisher liked it, and so we had the date, and I somewhere in there, as you're kind of doing that process, we just talked about the 2 steps forward, sometimes 1 step back, sometimes
Yeah.
3 steps back. I think I think so oftentimes we're told that we have to just sort of will our way through something. You just have to kind of demand it's going to happen and know it's going to happen. And, for me, and it's different for everyone, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But sort of this gentle mindset of being able to, come at something that maybe hasn't worked before, but when you've made a lot of changes in yourself, when you are not the same person, you understand things differently, you've had different experiences, being able to maybe come back to something that really tripped you up before. And, my experience walking through these things is I had no idea what was going to happen, but
Mm.
if you can just hold that gentle idea, this could be different. It doesn't have to play out maybe the same way, painful things. And I think that's true with loving people, learning to love after you've been really hurt. It's true with all kinds of success, but just that gentle idea really sort of lit up for me. And that's how we got to that one.
Well, I think it works. I think it's a great title. And to remind the folks at home once again, the name of the book is This Time Could Be Different. It follows Madeline, a high-powered exec who seems to have it all, everything, of course, except happiness. She embarks on a journey of self-discovery through yoga, meditation, and facing uncomfortable truths. Along the way, she challenges everything she thought she knew about success, purpose, and fulfillment. Khristin, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Great having you on the show. I appreciate your wit, wisdom, and your insight. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.